You have to have a very clear understanding of what it is you have to sell. You have to know your product. What is my product? Who am I selling to? So I need to know my customers. So know my product, know my customer, find ways to create communication, and ask everybody to buy.
You're listening to Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork, a podcast discussing the latest trends and technologies in the food and supplements industries, brought to you by Trustwell, featuring conversations with regulatory experts, quality and safety champions, and thought leaders across the industry. I'm your host, Lydia Adams, VP of Marketing at Trustwell. If you're loving the conversation, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned to the end of the episode where you'll hear our guests tell us their key food industry predictions for 2025. All right, let's jump right in. Welcome to Food Tech Talk, Supply Chain Insights from Farm to Fork. On today's episode, we're delighted to welcome Russ Hawkins. Russ is the president and CEO of Agilence Inc., a leading provider of data analytics solutions designed to help restaurants, retailers, and grocery businesses reduce preventable loss and improve operational efficiency. With a strong background in technology leadership, Russ has spent decades driving innovation in AI, automation, and exception-based reporting to help businesses make data-driven decisions. Under his leadership, Agilence has transformed how companies leverage transaction data to optimize performance, enhance security, and improve customer experiences. Welcome to the show, Russ.
Thanks for having me, Lydia.
I'm super excited about this topic. I think it's on everybody's mind. So before we get into the meat of it, maybe you could share with us really what drew you into the world of analytics, data, and technology, and a little bit more about your background.
Sure. My background has been in technology for quite a long time, and I kind of grew up in the telecom business of all places. And I go back a few decades, as you can probably tell from my gray hair. How I ended up here was through my prior company. So I've been the CEO of 3 startup venture-backed companies, none of which did I found. So I've kind of been going to say fix it because I haven't always been fix it situations. But generally speaking, I've come into these companies at the request of the venture capitalists, basically trying to provide an adult supervision is the way I like to say it, for these companies as they're growing. When I first came into Agilence, we were almost 100% focused on loss prevention and on the kind of resolution side of loss prevention as opposed to the discovery side. I made a major change in the company to focus on identifying problems, identifying anomalies, all based on data. As far as specifically data, my previous companies have been in high performance computing and in networking areas, and I had a very strong interest in getting into a pure software company. And what I really like to do is build companies. And so that's it's not necessarily specifically around retail and restaurants. It's more about building a company and building something enduring of value for the investors that I tend to work for.
That's an awesome background. And to bring that into the retail and restaurant space, it's really great to see. So, how have you seen really technology evolve in the past decade with all this experience in building these companies that you have?
I can go back a lot more than a decade. I mean, I remember I started out when there was, copper wire is the way you connected things. And so obviously there's been a huge evolution in communication and networking technologies that continues to accelerate. The late 90s on bringing onto the internet and changing of the communication protocols changed a lot of things. We've strictly just gotten faster and faster and faster in terms of the networking infrastructure. Government has obviously had a big hand in helping to jumpstart the technological evolution that we're on with the internet. It really came out of a federal government-funded organization called DARPA. But at any rate, we've seen more and more proliferation of software businesses and software technologies. Those have expanded dramatically. One of the things that I've observed here from a coding standpoint is the amount of efficiency that's been gained in coding. Now we have coding capabilities without even knowing how to be a coder. You can, this so-called vibe coding today, which is kind of understanding what you want to do, being able to articulate it and letting the AI help you translate that into specific code. So I think we're just at the beginning of that, and that's been a huge change in the way that I look at the world and the way that I look at the productivity of my developers. So between the bandwidth changes, the reliability of the network, the evolution of coding technologies, I think we're seeing more and more of what Mark Andreessen says is software eating the world. So that's why I wanted to be in the software business, because much of my historical background has been on the hardware side, although the real value in any hardware business is also the embedded software that's in there. But I wanted to be in a pure software play. This particular company was a very, very small company when I started, only 7 people and less than $1 million in sales. And so we've been quite successful, and with not without some significant bumps in the road. And we continue to embrace the evolution of technological change. We see more and more of it across our business. We touch many, many, many different types of technologies, and we're seeing advances across the board. I think we're just at the beginning of that with the new developments in AI technologies.
I completely agree. We're going to talk more about AI in a little bit. I wanted to kind of bring it back to the restaurants and the retail, industries. How are you seeing these companies really kind of leverage technology and automation and all these things that are coming out that we just talked about? And then also kind of maintaining that human touch of high quality customer experiences that they're building, and maybe give us some insight on how that balance works for companies in this industry.
Well, I think the first thing that I'll talk about is the amount of data that is being generated by the average company today. I mean, it is just accelerating as software takes over various analytical functions, and as even the hardware that is operating in these stores like POS systems evolve and change. The amount of data that is coming out of it is accelerating on a truly on an exponential basis. A lot of people misuse the word exponential, but truly is an exponential amount of data. And so one of the biggest challenges that I think all these businesses have is how to wrangle that data, how to get insights out of the data that are going to help them run their business better. And that's really what we're about. There's so much of this stuff coming out of every system. There's back office systems in the restaurant business. There's kitchen timers and drive-through timers and front end timers and the POS system and loyalty and third-party delivery. Every one of these is spewing out data, and there's gems in there. First, you have to find the haystacks, and then you have to find the needles. And so I think that's a huge challenge for people. And the ones that are doing it right are the ones that are focusing on the customer experience, from my perspective. So there's a lot of investment in understanding what's happening in the customer decision process. A lot of this is more easily seeable in the e-com area, on websites and those kinds of things. And many of those capabilities, you can really watch somebody going through their thought process if they're logged onto Amazon, right? Everybody has had this experience where they associate potential items in your cart with other things that other people have bought. They have your history. They know a lot of those things. What's lagged a little bit behind is how that is implemented on the bricks and mortar side. And we're seeing now many companies evolve to essentially give you the same kind of visibility into the customer experience, but do it on a physical basis. And we're actually seeing more integration between what happens online and what happens in the store, largely accelerated during the pandemic. So most of the companies that had bricks and mortar locations had severe restrictions during the pandemic, and suddenly they had to start thinking differently about the way that they use their stores. And stores became an extension, essentially, of the warehouse rather than, a showroom, so to speak. And many of these things, like buying online and picking up in store, buying online, returning in store, making sure that when you have that customer interaction at the store, that you're getting maximum value out of it, that you're maybe helping them make decisions about products that they want to return so they can continue to spend the money that they already spent with you, spend it again in the store. And so there's been a huge change in the amount of data that companies have about their business, as I already mentioned, but also about the customers themselves, right? They can link the profile online, which usually has lots more information, with their loyalty programs and with their behavior. The video technology is expanding rapidly so that you can identify individuals by face, not without some controversy, by the way. A tremendous amount of controversy around some of that facial recognition software and the way it's being used in retail. But generally speaking, those companies that have already kind of declared their fealty to a company, they've signed up as a loyalty customer. They may be using the app in a restaurant environment. they essentially have given you permission to do some of these things. And so it's easier and easier for companies to build profiles of the individuals down to very, very granular levels, way granular than ever has been done before. Maybe before you were able to identify age or geographic location. Now you can really, really pinpoint and target what people's needs are, what their interests are. And if you're capable and you're smart and you think about it, then you can tailor your offers. You can tailor the experience of those customers to those profiles, and that makes it more efficient for everybody. There's, of course, some concerns about the amount of data that's being collected on people, and I think those are pretty legitimate concerns. But in terms of pure customer satisfaction and in terms of pure customer experience, I think it's changed the world dramatically.
Looking to improve your supply chain? At Trustwell, we've been connecting the dots between the food industry and data for over 40 years to give you more control and visibility across the full supply chain. Our comprehensive Food Logic platform and our new Genesis Foods set a new standard for compliance, transparency, and quality across the food industry. Request a demo today. The link is in the show notes, or visit us at trustwell.com. I'm glad you brought this up because I think that what consumers today expect is so different and it continues to evolve. And to your point about, yes, they want personalized experiences. They also sometimes want privacy, and it's this, fine line. What are some new trends that you've seen in terms of retail restaurants of consumer expectations that maybe didn't exist before?
Well, I think you hit on the main one. The expectations have risen dramatically. And I would say that there's a wide range of capabilities and perspectives among customers. But shoppers want to be identified for the most part. They want their needs to be understood. They don't want to have to repeat themselves. They love it that you have a history of the experience. And that applies both to retail and to restaurants and to grocery stores. I mean, you pull into a McDonald's these days, and first question you get is, are you going to be using your mobile app today, right? So that they can get your order history. In some cases, they can even start using AI and those kinds of things to start the order, knowing that you're going to 90% chance you're going to order the same thing and get the ball rolling and improve the throughput, improve the response time, reduce the wait times and those kinds of things. But as you point out, having all that information also leads to potentially privacy concerns. And so I think it's still early times on that. And I myself am less of a sharer. I'm less of a user of these things. That probably a function of my advanced age, but it is a dynamic that is absolutely changing the world from a retailer or restaurant operator standpoint, and absolutely changing the experience of individual users.
I completely agree. And one of the things that, you had said that caught my attention was kind of the changes from COVID. And I feel like a lot of that has to do with restaurant delivery being so everywhere now, right? Like there's just so many apps, so many things, right? And it's like, you remember back when you could only order a pizza and now you can order anything, and you do have those apps and all of that. And so how has that really, in your view, created data challenges or evolutions for the restaurant industry?
Well, I think one of the biggest challenges has been that there's as you point out, so many of these services, right? And while there, I think, are winners, Uber Eats is a winner, DoorDash is probably a winner. But as in terms of food delivery, by the way, it's not food delivery only anymore. Most of these companies are also branching out and trying to be the delivery mechanism for retailers and certainly for grocery. You got Instacart in grocery. They're trying to go into other areas as well. But I think from an operator standpoint, the challenge is that there are too many of them. There are too many of them to effectively deal with. And so we're seeing now the emergence of an app for apps. And what I mean by that is that, as a retailer, for me to have to, or a restaurant chain is probably a better example, for me to have to deal with 6 or 7 different preferred ways, the ways that their customers want to operate, and to have integration between the third-party app and the loyalty programs inside the company, to do that 4 or 5, 6, 7 times and to maintain those integrations and keep everything straight is a daunting experience. And so very, very recently, what I've seen is, as I mentioned, this app of apps. So now you're the operator, you deal directly with me. I'm this new company, and I am going to deal with all the apps. So you're going to get the advantage of working with every one of them, Uber Eats, DoorDash, whatever they might be, but you only have one interface that you need to deal with. So we're seeing that kind of proliferation happening, and that's solving that specific problem of how difficult it is for a restaurant chain to keep up with the many, many different options that their customers want to use. They're in the business of satisfying their customers. The other thing that you point out is that people have no patience anymore. I mean, nobody has any patience anymore. I want it delivered, and I want it delivered immediately. And I want it to be smooth. I want it to be painless. I want it to be frictionless. I want my credit card to be charged. And it's amazing the amount of value that's been created, or perceived value by the user, and the amount of dollars that are available for that. In other words, I'm willing to pay, if an item's a $10 item, I'm willing to pay $5 just to have it delivered on time, which I think is, again, probably a function of perspective. Public today, the buying public, certainly the most attractive buying public, which are, relatively young people from, let's say, 20 to 40, they've grown up in a world where, it wasn't like you could only order a pizza, right? It wasn't like you had to pick up the phone and get the pizza. They've known nothing but technology, nothing but their iPhones. And that's the way they expect the world to operate.
I think it goes to the consumer expectations, because it's not just like, I want this food, I want it now, and you better not forget my Dr. Pepper, you know what I mean? It's very high on the expectations. Yeah, and I think when we talk about all that data having to interact with other data points, there's a lot that has changed, I would say, even in the last 2, 3, 4, 5 years, specifically within restaurant industry, for sure.
Absolutely.
That was really interesting. So in terms of data accuracy and consistency, how does something like what your company offers help to bring a lot of data sources together? And what should companies be doing today to ensure that they aren't missing anything with data?
First of all, there's several standard capabilities that every restaurant and every retailer has. First of all, they've got a POS system of some sort, a point of sale system. And as I mentioned up front, there's huge evolution in the POS business. We've gone from what used to be a two-company landscape, which was NCR and IBM, and today there are literally dozens of them. One of the most popular ones, obviously, in restaurants is Toast, and then PAR Technologies is another company that's doing a lot of that business. These companies push out a tremendous amount of data, and they have, in many cases, their own analytic capability. I mentioned store timers and drive-through timers and kitchen timers, and in the back of all this is some kind of an ERP system. There's loyalty systems. All of these things do, as you point out, represent a very significant challenge for customers to try to kind of corral it all into one place. And that's really the problem that we are trying to solve. And the way that we solve that is that we have a standard way of interfacing with the data. We typically bring in half a dozen data sources at a minimum with each customer. So we bring in the POS transaction log, the digital transaction log, whatever that might be. It could be their app. It could be an e-com site. The company's HR file, so we know all the people that are working there. The item file, so it would be the restaurant items. In some cases, we have them down to the ingredient level. And so a lot of the work that happens is what happens up front, where we map all of this stuff into a database, and we use different kinds of databases. Oracle and Microsoft are probably chief among them. And a big part of our job is to kind of wrangle this stuff into a usable and comparable format, and to put it away with some additional functionality on top of it. So what we do is we harmonize all this data, we put it away in a database, and then we add operators, mathematical, statistical, Boolean operators, broadening and deepening the data sets. And then the key is to make that data set available to people without requiring them to be data scientists. I mean, and that's really the second thing that we do really well, which is to kind of democratize the availability and the access to that data. And, I know we're going to talk about AI later on, but this is a perfect opportunity to mention the way that AI is in changing that world. We are moving quickly. It's kind of like the vibe computing that I just talked about a little bit before. We're moving very, very quickly to being able to have analysts and people inside the companies simply talk about what they want to know of the data. And so no more coding required, no knowledge of SQL required. You still have to have it underneath it. But, our first step on that is to be able to have a natural language query capability and, ask a question in natural language. I'd like to know how many times I sold a Dr. Pepper, as you commented, with this type of sandwich or that type of sandwich. Or I would like to know people that took advantage of my limited time offer. What was the total check and how did that compare with all the other checks that were done yesterday across the entire business? So natural language query is a way of, our minds don't necessarily work. Not everybody's minds works like an engineer, like a software engineer. That's a very, very structured world. People are used to operating in a very unstructured world, and natural language query is the way to do that. Today it's typing, but very soon we'll be at the audio level of be able to simply declare what it is you want, maybe reference back to your loyalty app and prior purchases and say, I'd like to have, I forget the name of it, I want to have what I had last Thursday or whatever it might be. And that's going to really reduce and eliminate a lot of friction in the way people interact with the companies that they're buying from.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And it sounds like I know at the beginning, it seemed very that you guys were focused on loss prevention, which is, a great goal, but it also seems like it's now expanded to include a lot of these other things. So how has that evolution been and how long did it take for you guys to kind of make those changes?
It happened almost organically. I mean, our perspective, as I mentioned, is to kind of democratize access to the data. So we basically have tried to create a situation where people with expertise can ask questions of the data. We don't need to be the experts. The company doesn't need to be know. You already know what it is you want if you're in merchandising or you're in marketing or you're in customer success or you're in finance. Wherever you are in the organization, you know the questions that you want to ask. And so what happened for us was that we initially for most customers, went in with a loss prevention focus. What were we looking for in loss prevention? Well, we were looking for things like, were people giving away product? Were store managers comping too many meals in the restaurant space? Were our cashiers not ringing up merchandise, giving merchandise away and pocketing the money? Are discounts being applied the correct way? If there are multiple discounts, are they being applied in the order in which they were intended? So those were the kind of original things that we were looking at. Our sales tax is being properly accounted for. Is age verification being done where there's age verification required? Because nobody wants to be prosecuted for not selling liquor to people that aren't old enough to do it, or tobacco for that matter. Those were kind of the initial use cases that we did. But the product is fungible in the sense that all of this data is out there. And typically our loss prevention folks would have information quicker than other parts of the business. And so these other parts of the business, the marketers and the merchandisers, were like, well, where did you get all that information? How did that happen? How did you know that? Geez, do you think you could answer this question? Or an executive says, I'd really like to know how this this promotion was associated with overall sales volume. Can you help me answer that question? And so basically our customers taught us. I mean, we didn't teach our customers, they taught us. We just took what they taught us and taught others, right? And so we have this kind of community aspect of the way we think about our business, in that we want everybody to be part of the community and to share with each other. And as a result, everybody will get better. But for us, what it's done is it's taught us what the problems are in these other areas. We were relatively knowledgeable about loss prevention and maybe less knowledgeable about marketing and merchandising and promotions and finance and those kinds of things. But as our customers showed us how to do things with our software, we're able to take that and transfer it to other people. We have this thing called the water cooler, where we encourage people to kind of gather around the water cooler and share ideas. The result is that everybody gets better. It's good for us because customers stay with us and it's sticky for us. They learn from each other. They make relationships and working among themselves. And the end customer gets served better. So that's how we got here. And we learn every day. We have, at this point, hundreds of use cases across a wide variety of business problems and business opportunities. And we see it as our role to proliferate these things and to grow and to expand. We've already brought out some additional products to help in that area, and we're looking at a whole bunch of other things that we can do to expand this.
No, it's really cool. I mean, it really is the value of data and all the things that you can do with it. So yeah, no, that's really awesome. And I know I said we were talking about AI, so let's let's get into it. So, I mean, you gave that use case already, but what other things can businesses be doing that bring AI into their business? We recently had a webinar at Trustwell where our chief product officer and I were talking about this, and there's still a lot of folks that are not using AI.
It's amazing to me that there's anybody not using AI in today's world.
And and so it's like how, a lot of it is like, how do you get started? What do you do? And so specifically for kind of, retail restaurants, like what is your advice for people to start using it and how should they start using it?
I think across the board, every employee in the company ought to be using AI, if not for the business, for their own personal lives. Like, for example, search is dead as far as I'm concerned, or at least historical search is dead. I'm sure you had the experience of being frustrated with you type in something into Google and you get a whole page of results. None of it is relevant to what you're really looking for. Now, using these large language models, you can really get very, very specific about what your interests are. And it comes back to a little bit to this not needing expertise. I think everybody went through this phase of using Google and Googling things and so on. And that was, 5 years long or 10 years long. Now everybody should be using these tools every day, in my view. And I think managers in these business ought to be encouraging people to use it. In our case, I encourage people to use even the paid versions. The company will pay for them to use paid versions because it's kind of related to crowdsourcing, right? The only way you're going to know how to become effective using these technologies is to have people using the technologies and figuring out how to make it happen. And it's changing so fast. The versions of these technologies are coming out so fast. The iterations and the companies are coming out so fast that I really think you have to encourage a culture of experimentation and testing among all your people. That said, so that's kind of the generic thing. Then I think you need to think about certain specific areas. There are certain areas of your business that are going to lend themselves extremely well to using some of these tools. Coding, I've mentioned already a couple of times. It's absolutely one of them. The amount of productivity, I think we are at the beginning of a new age of productivity improvements as a result of these technologies. In the coding area, my expectation now is that I can get a superstar coder and they can do the work of 5 or 6 people from 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Now, that doesn't mean that they're going to replace them because I think what happens is you can do more interesting things more quickly and more complex things more quickly using these tools. And they're kind of like having an assistant on steroids. So I think software development is absolutely an area. I think in the customer success area, we've already talked a little bit about the need to improve the customer experience. And again, there's so much data being presented and available that using some of these tools to improve the customer success. I mean, we're finally getting to a point where voice attendants are finally getting to the point where it's just not complete frustration all the time. And I'm a key person on frustration. I'm working with voice attendants, but we're starting to get to the point where I don't need your address. I want to know what I can do in this area. And these automated chatbots can respond in a larger and larger and larger percentage of those questions. And I think that that's going to continue. I don't think it's ever going to replace people completely. And not an advocate of that by any means. But I do believe that from a customer experience standpoint, you can improve that customer experience by using those things. So I would recommend that you look at your customer success area. From a marketing standpoint, I think there's huge ways of testing ideas using these technologies. You've got available to you essentially a coach in the large language models that can help you, even though they hallucinate, which we is pretty well documented. They also can be very, very strong advisors and can help you make better decisions and help you reduce the amount of time it takes to get something that really works in the field. I think there's tons of opportunities here.
Absolutely. And it is all about training these, we have GPTs that we've trained specifically for certain things to give us information, not necessarily using just the freebie versions of these, but really making them work for you in a way that saves you time. I mean, it's pretty incredible where we are with this.
We're using this capability to have the algorithms create norms in any aspect of the business. So it could be what's going out the front door. It could be tracking inventory, expiring inventory. If there's in a grocery store, there's tons of things that are expiring. and to be able to, a lot of it ends up getting wasted because companies aren't aware of what's on their own shelves, right? We have a company that loses several $100 million a year because they haven't been able to get the material out of their distribution centers onto the shelves in time to be observing of the expiration date. It's a daunting data problem, but it has huge impacts on the profitability of the business as well. I think about food safety and I think about temperature and storage tracking and being able to monitor automatically what's happening in all of, if I've got 1,000 stores, I've got maybe 10,000 refrigerators and storage locations, and you've got IoT devices that are collecting the information, but aggregating it and then using AI to identify when there's an anomaly that is important enough to get your attention, and then using an alerting capability to get that to your attention rather than having to read reams of data. Monitoring and alerting is becoming a bigger and bigger part of our business. We're basically trying to use the technology to be the trainer of people. We have a customer, I can't really mention their name, but they open a bunch of Halloween stores every year. And they do that for only a 4-month period. They open close to 2,000 of these stores. They don't have time to train managers. And so what they do is they use the technology to do it. They set up a series of data-driven monitors where if a combination of data events happens, that triggers automatic alert to the store manager, who's somebody who's brand new, basically has no context with the company, and says, okay, this is what happened. Here's what you should do. Take step A, B, C, and D. And it makes it much more efficient. It improves the effectiveness of the stores. It increases revenues because you're able to solve problems more quickly. It increases profits because things that are going the wrong way can be quickly stopped. And it reduces the amount of turnover and training time you have to do with people. So one of the problems I have, and you can tell that when you give me the stage, I'll just never stop talking, but our technology, the ways to leverage data are almost infinite. It's getting to the point of understanding what are the most important things that you can do. How can you spend your time to most effectively improve the operation of the business and the customer satisfaction?
That's a great summary. And since, I don't always talk to a lot of CEOs, so when I do, I love to hear kind of your advice in general about company growth. I mean, that's really what it's all about. And a lot of these tools accelerate that, but you've built a lot of companies. So maybe share with us just some words of wisdom, and especially for those listeners that are in middle market, they're in growth mode, like what should they be doing now?
Well, first of all, you have to have a very clear understanding of what it is you have to sell. You have to know your product. What is my product? Who am I selling to? So I need to know my customers. So know my product, know my customer, find ways to create communication and ask everybody to buy. I mean, at the end of the day, those are the things that I think work best. Now, I can elaborate on all of those, but having a clear understanding of what your product is, what kind of benefits is designed to deliver. Sometimes you make a mistake, right? Some of the biggest companies in the world have been from mistakes, right? They were actually in another business and they created this maybe as an internal communication tool, and suddenly they became, a communication company. If you understand what your product is, what kind of benefits it's going to deliver, that is either what problems it's going to be able to solve or what opportunities it's going to help you to take advantage of, then understand who the buyer is, which segments, which industries are the ones that are going to benefit mostly from the capabilities that you have in the product. Find ways to create communication channels with those companies, and that can be very, very broad set of things. Could be, do you need a sales force? Do you not need a sales force? Can you rely on marketing and driving people to your website? And then making sure that you make it easy for people to buy. Not only make it easy for them to buy, but make sure that you ask them to buy, that you encourage them to buy, you give them reasons to buy. And so, in my view, if you do those things, then you will get off to a very, very good start and you'll be able to grow your business pretty well.
That's awesome. Thank you for that. I guess just one more question for you, because I like to kind of think about the future, in this space that is just changing rapidly. So, in your view, what do you see as really like the next big thing? Like, what does the future look like in the next year to 5 years?
We've talked a lot about AI already. I believe that we are in the infancy of the implementation of these technologies, and I think we are going to have wonderful advances and also very, very significant challenges as we embed these technologies into literally every aspect of what we do. And I think it's going to change the way everybody operates. It's going to change the way the businesses operate. It's going to change the way buyers operate. I do worry a little bit about dislocation of people. I'm not saying that. I mean, this is a normal thing, right? The Industrial Revolution did the same thing back in the late 1800s, right? When weavers suddenly were displaced by automatic weaving machines, and it's really the history of the world. So I think we're going to see more and more of that. I think, the advice I give my kids is to learn how to do prompts, learn how to be a prompter, learn how to interact with these models. And as they evolve, you need to evolve with them, because there'll be plenty of jobs for people who are good at prompting. And I think that that's going to take over. I think we're going to continue to see increases in bandwidth. I think we're going to continue to see significant advances in video and the miniaturization of video and the embedding of video into everyday products. We're seeing now Meta bringing out, almost a normal pair of glasses that have embedded computers in them. I think we're going to see that continue to move up an adoption and miniaturization curve. Things are going to continue to observe at least something close to Moore's law, where it's going to get, smaller and more powerful on an iterative basis. And so we're going to see it permeating every part of your life. That's the way I see it. And I'm not sure it's 100% a good thing, to be honest. I like to sit back. I still read books, actual books. I like carrying them around. I like their heft. I like reading the pages and flipping them around. And I'm famous inside my company for not being 100% digital, right? I have a very, very well organized file cabinet, and I have lots of paper in there. I'm not sure if they're just trying to butter me up or what, but they often tell me that it's an old school thing for me and it works for me. It can be translated onto screens. I think you have to have a balance, I guess, is what I'm trying to say. You have to embrace the technology, but you also need to know what works right for you and what you want to do with your lives.
That's all really great advice. I love it. Thank you so much, Russ. This has been super enlightening to hear your perspective. Is there anything you want to leave us with? Any final thoughts that we didn't discuss that you want to share?
To be honest, I had prepared all kinds of stuff around food safety because I thought that was your primary focus. Identifying food risks is one of the things I was going to talk about, and then how to prevent illness and those kinds of things. But no, I think I'm very happy with the discussion that we've had, and I just recommend that people stay light on their feet and stay focused on the goals and your personal goals. I'm a big believer in having personal goals and having short, medium, and long-term goals, and making sure you pay attention to the people that are closest to you in your life. That's your friends and family. Don't forget them, and you'll be happy.
Awesome. Well, thank you again. This has been great, and we really appreciate you coming on.
Well, thank you, Lydia. I appreciate you having me.
Thank you for joining us for another bite-sized nugget of Food Tech Talk, supply chain insights from farm to fork. Make sure to subscribe. And if you love the podcast, leave us a review on Apple Podcasts, YouTube Music, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcasts. To learn more about Trustwell and request your free demo of our technology platform that connects food formulation, products, nutrition analysis, and compliant labeling with traceability, recall readiness, and supply chain transparency, please visit us at www.trustwell.com and click Get Started, or click the link in the show notes to learn more. Thanks for listening.